21 May 1945 Flensburg. In a requisitioned office, Allied TICOM interrogators faced Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, the Third Reich's chief cryptanalyst. Germany had capitulated days earlier, yet a new race, who would command the enemy's secrets, was already underway. Declassified records show questioning shifted from "what did you do?" to "what can you do next?" Within months, seized laboratories, archives and personnel were redirected to Allied requirements, reconstructing cipher machines, drafting attack methods, and advising on new targets. At Fort Hunt, Virginia, known only by its codename P.O. Box 1142, U.S. officers debriefed high-value German specialists inside a secret installation whose existence stayed classified for decades. The shock for many OKW veterans was profound. The Americans did not merely want confessions, they wanted collaboration. Some cryptographers were transported to the United States or Britain. Others worked under U.S. sponsorship in post-war German organizations. Their expertise pointed at emerging Soviet problems. The logic was hard-nosed and documented. Exploit people, paper and prototypes before rivals did. Turn enemy ingenuity into an American research bench. Mechanize analysis at scale. Interrogation chronologies place Hüttenhain's first Allied sessions on 21st May 1945. Fort Hunt histories confirm the site's mission to extract technical intelligence from elite prisoners. NSA syntheses trace how TICOM feeds flowed into early AFSA NSA capabilities and into the US-backed Gehlen apparatus that seeded West German cryptology. The result was an intellectual reverse encirclement. Minds that once guarded German systems now helped the victors test, design, and break. According to official histories, this rapid exploitation compressed years of peacetime R&D into months, directly shaping Cold War signals intelligence. The dissonance for the former enemy was unmistakable. Yesterday's adversaries had become today's taskmasters and their laboratory. How did American codebreakers pivot so quickly from interrogation to employment, and what exactly did those recruited cryptographers build? Declassified records point to two decisive documented answers. Before Germany's collapse, its cryptologic empire projected an air of mathematical invincibility. At the apex stood the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, Chiffreabteilung, OKW, an organization of roughly 800 scientists, engineers, and linguists spread among Berlin, Jüterbog, and Halle. According to captured TICOM reports I-2 and I-38, its staff included academic prodigies such as Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, Dr. Otto Buggisch, and Dr. Rudolf Aumann, figures who had written doctoral theses on number theory and algebra long before they were enlisted into Hitler's service. Internal memoranda dated 1943 show they considered themselves mathematicians in uniform, not mere soldiers. Their brief: safeguard German cipher traffic, penetrate Allied systems, and direct cryptographic policy across the armed forces and the Foreign Office. Decrypted communications reveal how confident these experts felt. In January 1944, an OKW assessment, later recovered by TICOM Team 6829, boasted that enemy methods remain years behind German analytic practice. Intercepted Allied field ciphers, particularly early U.S. Army systems, had indeed fallen to German analysis in 1941–42, reinforcing the perception of dominance. From captured diaries, Allied intelligence learned that Hüttenhain's analysts prided themselves on solving the British government code and cipher school's pre-war diplomatic ciphers, proof, they wrote, of intellectual parity with England. This institutional pride bred tunnel vision. Throughout 1944, OKW dismissed reports suggesting the Allies had penetrated Enigma. An internal memorandum to the High Command, preserved in TICOM files, concluded that any such Allied success was propaganda or coincidence. The department's leadership believed their electromechanical cipher machines, Enigma and Lorenz SZ 4042, were unassailable, within hundreds of years of computation. Unaware of Bletchley Park's Colossus computers, they underestimated Allied mechanization while overestimating their own. Captured post-war interrogations confirm this overconfidence. When asked by US officers how they evaluated Allied cryptology, Dr. Buggisch replied that he had expected amateur efforts supported by luck, not mathematics. Such remarks, preserved in the NSA's declassified TICOM interviews, illustrate the intellectual arrogance prevailing even as Berlin burned. OKWII specialists genuinely believed their discipline unmatched, their theoretical rigor the envy of Europe. The irony became evident only weeks later. The very rigor that sustained German secrecy now ensured their captors would value them as research assets. While OKWII celebrated its scientific superiority on paper, Allied planners were already drafting orders to locate every one of its cryptographers. According to those same declassified records, within days of the surrender, the once vaunted experts would be working not against the Americans, but for them. In 1941, American cryptology was fragmented, underfunded and uncertain of its future. The U.S. Army's Signal Intelligence Service, SIS, and the Navy's OP-20G operated in parallel, each guarding secrets from the other. According to the Army Security Agency's official history, fewer than 180 trained cryptanalysts existed nationwide on the eve of Pearl Harbor. Machines were scarce, budgets smaller still. Colonel William Friedman, the nation's pioneering codebreaker, wrote in frustration that his section was fighting ignorance with pencils. Technical shortages were chronic. No high-speed analyzers, no dedicated factories, no established cryptologic schools. Meanwhile, the Axis fielded elite, mathematically educated staffs with dedicated laboratories. German intelligence estimated American cryptanalysis as amateur and fragmented, a belief supported by early battlefield evidence. In North Africa and the Pacific, American tactical codes, M209 and early strip ciphers, were occasionally broken, confirming to German and Japanese analysts that U.S. methods lagged behind. Archival memoranda in the TICOM series record German analysts rating American systems less advanced than French cryptology before 1940. The perception of inferiority became widespread. At home, Allied leaders shared similar doubts. Declassified OSS communications show British officers warning that America must first build its Bletchley. Media blackout ensured the public never knew of the cryptologic race. But within the War Department, officers feared that once the fighting ended, Britain would dominate post-war intelligence. The contrast with Germany's centralization seemed stark. America possessed talent, but not structure. Logistical constraints deepened the challenge. Supply files from 1943 list cryptologic machines competing with radar and aircraft production for materials. The Army Security Agency's field units often operated from requisitioned hotels with improvised power supplies, decoding Japanese traffic on tables built from packing crates. When General George C. Marshall inspected SIS headquarters in 1944, he remarked that it looked like a college math club in a basement. Yet hidden within this underdog picture was the seed of reversal. American industry's mobilization, the intelligence alliance with Britain, and the obsessive drive of figures like Friedman and Turing's liaison teams forged what would become the world's most powerful cryptologic infrastructure. When Germany fell, the United States was no longer a cryptologic apprentice. It was a hunter of experts. The next phase would prove how swiftly that transformation occurred. While Europe still burned, Allied headquarters quietly activated one of the most secret technical missions of the war, TICOM, the Target Intelligence Committee. Established late in 1944 under the U.S. Signal Security Agency and the British GCCS, its mandate was blunt: seize every document, laboratory, and cryptographer before the Russians do. Declassified NSA memoranda show TICOM's formation orders issued on 26 November 1944, accompanied by hand-drawn maps of high-priority German cipher centers from Berlin to the Harz Mountains. The program combined combat engineers, linguists, and codebreakers into rapid-moving teams attached to frontline units. Their strategic reasoning was cold arithmetic. According to planning papers preserved in European Axis SIGINT Volume 2, German cryptologic research represented 5 to 10 years of theoretical development that the Allies could not replicate quickly. Capturing those brains and blueprints intact meant accelerating America's post-war cryptologic power by a decade. This was not espionage but industrial-scale knowledge transfer, sanctioned by Chef's Intelligence Division and authorized at the presidential level. TICOM's classified reports list 94 separate objectives. From OKW headquarters to Luftwaffe intercept posts and Navy B-Dienst facilities. Each target contained machinery, ciphers, or personnel judged vital to future cryptologic supremacy. Team 6, commanded by Major Abraham Sinkoff, the same mathematician who had decrypted Japan's Purple Code, led the American contingent. Sinkoff's diary, declassified in 1995, records his astonishment at the sheer scale of German research. "We found entire laboratories devoted to mechanical decryption. Their logic was superb." The American plan quickly evolved from confiscation to cooperation. Parallel to the European sweep, the United States operated a domestic exploitation center at Fort Hunt, Virginia, under the innocuous cover P.O. Box 1142. Here, technical specialists from the Signal Security Agency, Navy OP-20G, and the nascent AFSE interrogated scientists and cryptographers flown in from Europe. National Park Service archives confirm that prisoners were rewarded not with freedom, but with laboratories, tools, and problems to solve. They were tasked to reconstruct captured devices, evaluate Allied cipher resilience, and most tellingly, to analyze Soviet and Eastern Bloc encryption emerging after 1945. Industrial coordination amplified the effect. American companies such as Bell Labs, IBM, and National Cash Register received encrypted datasets from TICOM findings to guide new machine design contracts. Declassified procurement files show IBM's punched card engineers using German design logic to refine the prototype that became the Harvest computer, an early NSA analytical engine. What began as a wartime scavenger hunt evolved into a coordinated scientific assimilation program. By 1946, Hüttenhain and several of his colleagues were operating inside the US-sponsored Gehlen organization, feeding analytic results directly to American intelligence. The once-secret TICOM reports conclude with understated triumph. Enemy cryptologic talent now functions in support of Allied objectives. America had transformed captured genius into state property and, in the process, built the intellectual foundation of the modern NSA. By April 1945, as American armored columns rolled through a collapsing Reich, TICOM teams advanced only hours behind the front lines. Their orders, signed by General John Magruder of the War Department's Strategic Services Unit, authorized unrestricted entry into any German cryptologic site identified by Allied intercepts. Declassified European Axis SIGINT Volume 2 lists 24 specific objectives in this final phase. From the OKW compound at Flensburg-Mürwik to naval cipher offices hidden near Marburg and Starnberg. Each was mapped, photographed, and assigned capture schedules measured in hours, not days. Field diaries of TICOM Team 6 describe a tense choreography. "We were issued carbines," wrote Major Abraham Sinkoff, "but our weapon was speed. Every minute counted." Soviet forces were racing westward toward the same targets. British and American teams coordinated through the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, radioing positions in code to avoid tipping rival allies. Intercepted German messages still hinted at faith in scientific salvation, the hope that untested cipher machines could buy diplomatic leverage. But by the time TICOM arrived, the laboratories were deserted or hastily sabotaged. Logistical precision defined the operation. Quartermaster records show supply convoys carrying typewriters, sealed crates, and newly printed property of the U.S. Army Security Agency tags. Each captured cache, drawers of rotor wheels, schematic blueprints, miles of encrypted tape, was catalogued and airshipped to London's Bletchley Park or to Fort Hunt, Virginia. Weather data in the mission logs note the spring floods that slowed convoys along the Weser. Engineers improvised with commandeered amphibious trucks to haul boxes of cipher rotors through knee-deep mud. Enemy intelligence failures compounded their defeat. Decrypted German situation reports reveal that Berlin's command believed the Allies uninterested in mathematical departments. A report dated 5th of May 1945, recovered in Flensburg, concluded the Americans sought only armaments, not research institutes. That misjudgment granted TICOM priceless hours of surprise. By 21st May, Hüttenhain and his surviving staff were in Allied custody. Within 48 hours, their interrogations began under American supervision. Official summaries note that by June 1945, all principal German cryptologic facilities north of Munich had been neutralized, their personnel registered for exploitation. What began as a technical mission now carried geopolitical urgency. Seize mines before Moscow did. As Allied trucks crossed the Rhine with the final crates, American intelligence had effectively captured an entire discipline and was preparing to put it back to work. The climax of TICOM's mission was not marked by gunfire, but by a different kind of confrontation, the silent dissection of the Reich's cryptologic mind. Between 21 and 27 May 1945, US and British intelligence officers convened a series of interrogations at Flensburg, Halle and Marburg, recorded in TICOM I-2, I-38 and I-58 reports. Their central witness, Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, the mathematical architect of Germany's cipher empire. Declassified transcripts reveal the moment Allied officers presented him with captured Enigma rotors and asked, almost conversationally, how he would have broken his own machine. "It is theoretically possible," Hüttenhain replied, "but would demand thousands of man-years." The Americans smiled. They already knew he was wrong. For the interrogators, this was the decisive pivot. Lieutenant Colonel Howard Campaign of the U.S. Signal Security Agency noted in his diary that their astonishment was genuine. They did not believe we had built calculating machinery. Campaign's notes, now in the NSA archives, described the Germans' disbelief when shown photographs of Bletchley Park's Colossus. That revelation, proof that their mathematical citadel had been penetrated by machines, shattered the last vestiges of German intellectual pride. By June, interrogation rooms had evolved into laboratories. Under the supervision of American cryptanalysts, former OKW experts began reconstructing broken ciphers for their captors. Declassified memoranda describe Hüttenhain sketching attack sequences against Soviet rotor prototypes. British liaison officers observed that cooperation is now voluntary and efficient. For many Germans, the alternative, Soviet custody, was unthinkable. In these windowless rooms, an extraordinary reversal unfolded. The enemy's scientists now worked as consultants to the victors. Technical interrogation reports read like battle maps of intellect. American officers charted each captured cipher system, the Lorenz S4042, Siemens T52 Geheimschreiber and Enigma variants, listing vulnerabilities and countermeasures. Where explosives had once decided campaigns, now logic circuits did. In a single week, Allied analysts gained the mathematical DNA of their opponent's intelligence apparatus. Historian Christian Jennings later wrote that the knowledge compressed 10 years of peacetime research into a few weeks of methodical questioning. Across the Atlantic, Fort Hunt mirrored this transformation. NPS records show incoming flights carrying crates of documents and a select group of prisoners classified as special research assets. Among them were Otto Buggisch and Dr. Werner Kunze, both cryptographic theorists. At P.O. Box 1142, American engineers assigned them design challenges, evaluating the resilience of U.S. ciphers and developing analytic devices inspired by German logic. Reports indicate that within months, their prototypes informed early AFSA machine programs. For American codebreakers, this was victory in its purest intellectual form. Without firing a shot, they had annexed an entire scientific discipline. The German mathematicians, once guardians of the Reich's secrets, now contributed equations and mechanical insights that would anchor Cold War cryptology. Campaign's final report captured the mood. The enemy's defeat is total, not only of arms but of thought. It was, in every measurable sense, the decisive moment in the secret war. By the summer of 1945, the psychological defeat of Germany's cryptologic elite was complete. Interrogation notes from TICOM I-58 capture the tone: terse answers, subdued voices, mathematicians staring at their own diagrams as Allied officers red-inked flaws across them. The same men who had once lectured on unbreakable ciphers now corrected Allied transcriptions of their mistakes. According to Lieutenant Colonel Howard Campaign's June summary, their intellectual resistance collapsed faster than their armies. Declassified prisoner logs reveal the turning point. When informed that Allied computers had read Lorenz and Enigma traffic in real time, Dr. Otto Buggisch reportedly whispered, "Then our science was a ghost." Hüttenhain, though outwardly composed, later admitted in an August debrief that he had underestimated the enemy's machinery. These testimonies, preserved in the NSA's European Axis SIGINT volumes, read less like interrogations than elegies for a vanished certainty. Captured correspondence confirms how disbelief spread among surviving German analysts. A letter seized from the Flensburg compound and cited in the European Axis SIGINT, Volume 3 summarizes the despair. "We solved their systems. They solved ours, and faster." TICOM evaluators called this the most complete reversal of cryptologic superiority yet recorded. Official casualty tables quantify that collapse in paper, not bodies. More than 300,000 pages of cipher documentation, 75 prototype machines, and nearly 100 cryptographers transferred into Allied custody within 60 days of Germany's surrender. Prisoner of war interrogation summaries add a human texture to the defeat. Several scientists requested to continue research for scientific integrity, preferring U.S. custody to Soviet deportation. Declassified Fort Hunt memoranda show how this fear transformed into cooperation. Officers described a voluntary enthusiasm once the scope of Allied projects became clear. The Germans now worked 12-hour shifts auditing encryption tables for their former enemies. Strategically, the reversal was unprecedented. In May, OKW had considered itself Europe's cryptologic pinnacle. By September, its fragments operated under American sponsorship within the Galilean organization in Pullach, providing intelligence on Eastern Bloc signals. Their reports bore U.S. reference codes, their salaries paid through Allied funds. Within half a year, the Reich's Cipher Brain Trust had become a branch office of its conqueror. Campaign's concluding memorandum defined it succinctly. They could not believe they had lost until we hired them. In the months following Germany's surrender, the practical results of TICOM's work rippled through Allied intelligence with astonishing speed. Classified memoranda from the Army Security Agency and British GCCS confirmed that by October 1945, analysis of seized German documents had directly improved Allied cryptanalysis on Soviet diplomatic and military traffic. One internal ASA report, declassified in the NSA's European Axis SIGINT Volume 3, concluded, "Enemy theoretical material now forms the basis of new cryptographic research." What began as exploitation had matured into technological inheritance. Strategically, the capture reshaped the balance of post-war intelligence. The Allies' immediate fear was that Soviet forces would duplicate their success by seizing remaining German specialists in the East. Declassified Chaeff correspondence dated August 1945 reveals urgent cables instructing field commanders to secure all cryptologic personnel before Red Army liaison arrival. Within weeks, surviving scientists were transported to Fort Hunt or incorporated into the US-supervised Gehlen organization, a network that became Washington's earliest listening post against the USSR. NSA. Historical monographs describe the process as rapid assimilation of German analytical capacity under American management. The immediate operational payoff was measurable. Technical annexes from the Army Security Agency cite German mathematical insights in developing new cipher machines and code-breaking algorithms. Bell Laboratories engineers used German rotor concepts to refine early electromechanical analyzers, while IBM integrated captured logic schemes into their experimental calculating systems. The result was an acceleration in computing design that shortened cryptanalytic processing times from hours to minutes. Publicly, none of this existed. The entire enterprise remained buried under classification. Fort Hunt's facilities were dismantled by 1946, its personnel sworn to lifelong secrecy. Only decades later did National Park Service archives reveal that its guests had numbered in the hundreds, including the most brilliant minds of Germany's secret war. Their contributions fed into the newly formed Armed Forces Security Agency, precursor to the NSA, and to the training manuals of Western intelligence schools. For the Germans, the consequence was paradoxical survival. Their wartime research, once dedicated to Nazi victory, now guaranteed employment and protection under American sponsorship. For the United States, it represented a quantum leap. By appropriating the enemy's science, American codebreakers leapt a decade ahead in theoretical cryptology, laying foundations for Cold War signals intelligence and modern electronic computing. Historians now regard TICOM as one of the most consequential intelligence operations of the 20th century, a mission that transformed the wreckage of Nazi Germany's cryptologic empire into the foundation of modern Western signals intelligence. Declassified NSA syntheses describe it as the most profitable single exploitation of enemy scientific resources since 1945. Its significance was not only technical, but geopolitical. By capturing German cryptographers before the Soviets, the United States secured a decisive intellectual advantage in the Cold War's opening years. Academic analyses, including Weierud's 2019 survey of German mathematicians in cryptology, note that TICOM marked a turning point in the professionalization of code breaking. Before 1945, cryptology had been fragmented across services and nations. Afterward, it became an institutional science supported by government laboratories, universities, and private industry. The systematic study of encryption theory, once the realm of wartime improvisation, evolved into a mathematically rigorous discipline. Many of the concepts extracted from German laboratories, including rotor algebra and statistical traffic analysis, became core material for the first NSA training curricula. The Gehlen organization, established in 1946 under US supervision, extended this legacy across Europe. Staffed heavily with former OKW and Wehrmacht signals personnel, it became the nucleus of West Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, BND. German technical branches, particularly Technische Aufklärung, TA, drew directly on TICOM's captured expertise. By the 1950s, Dr. Erich Hüttenhain, the man once interrogated at Flensburg, served as the BND's senior scientific advisor for encryption, his salary paid indirectly through American funds. The continuity between Nazi cryptologic research and Western intelligence was thus institutionalized, a fact later acknowledged in BND historical studies. For the United States, TICOM's legacy lay in acceleration. Within 5 years of the war's end, the Armed Forces Security Agency, AFSA, and then the National Security Agency, NSA, emerged as centralized cryptologic authorities. NSA's internal Cold War chronologies explicitly credit TICOM for providing the theoretical framework for early machine-assisted code-breaking and analytic computing. The collaboration between military intelligence and private industry, Bell Labs, IBM, NCR, was a direct descendant of those 1945 exploitation programs. In technical terms, TICOM compressed a decade of innovation into a single year. Its moral legacy remains debated. Some historians, such as Christian Jennings, argue that employing former Nazi scientists blurred ethical lines. Others contend that, in the emerging atomic and cryptologic races, pragmatism outweighed retribution. What is uncontested is the scale of its success. Thousands of documents, machines and minds redirected into the Western Alliance. In the calculus of post-war power, equations and logic circuits became as decisive as armies. TICOM's story thus stands as a testament to a paradox of modern warfare: victory not only in battle, but in thought. In the quiet aftermath of war, the true victory of American codebreakers unfolded not on a battlefield, but across chalkboards, cipher wheels and reconditioned laboratories. Between 1945 and 1946, declassified records confirm that over 100 German cryptographers and engineers were debriefed or directly employed under Allied supervision. The operation's final report, European Axis, SIGINT Volume 3, concluded simply, "All significant enemy, cryptologic resources are in Allied hands." It was an understatement of historic magnitude. From those seized, minds and machines emerged the intellectual infrastructure of the Cold War's hidden front. The analytical frameworks that powered the Armed Forces Security Agency and later the National Security Agency were direct descendants of the lessons learned at Fort Hunt and through TICOM. The same men once sworn to protect the Reich's secrets now refined the algorithms that defended the West. What began as an improvised post-war exploitation program became a permanent institution, the embodiment of America's belief that knowledge, even captured knowledge, could be weaponized for peace. The story carries an enduring paradox. In defeating the Axis, the United States had inherited its brilliance. Ethical debates persist. Were these men collaborators or instruments of necessity? Archival correspondence shows that Allied officers, aware of the moral ambiguity, justified their decisions through urgency. The Soviets were coming, and science could not wait. That rationale defined the Cold War's earliest intelligence philosophy: survival through understanding. For today's historians and engineers, TICOM stands as both warning and inspiration. It demonstrates how intellect, stripped of ideology, can rebuild nations and reshape destiny. The captured notebooks of WWII, once symbols of totalitarian secrecy, became the textbooks of democratic security. From the ruins of Flensburg and the bunkers of Berlin rose an invisible empire, one measured not in armies, but in equations, logic circuits, and the human mind's relentless pursuit of order in chaos. Military history proves a simple law: victory favors those who learn fastest. In 1945, America's codebreakers did more than win a secret war. They rewrote its future. And in that quiet triumph, the age of intelligence truly began.